Teaching with Synectics. As you recall, Synectics is a thinking strategy turned into a teaching model. It was developed by William Gordon in 1961, and it promotes learner creativity. It brings creativity to the conscious level through the use of metaphors and analogies, or as we call them in the model, analogs. The students are presented with a concept that's probably new to them, along with a parallel analog that is probably familiar to them. So in this class we might suggest something like teaching is like a stream. Now that's an appropriate use of the word like. The students are asked then to expound upon through their own ideas about how the two things, the concept and the analog, match. Next, the students might be asked to impersonate the analog and to impersonate the teaching model, to think in the personage of each of those as living individuals. What do they believe? What do they think? How do they feel? Etc. Finally, the teacher guides the students in thinking through similarities and differences among the concept and the analog. This model gives, this process gives students an out-of-the-box method of thinking through a concept. The teachers should use concepts that are new, but analogs that are, or analogies that are familiar to the students. In making comparisons between a concept and an analog, they know how well this helps the students to draw new insights and to better understand the new concept in familiar terms from the analog. There are two strategies. In the first strategy, the teacher begins with element 1, which is an identification of the status quo. What is? So we might have the students describe teaching as they see it, the processes as they understand it. In element 2, then, we would create a representative analogy. We would ask the students to suggest analogies that represent the original concept. So what analogies or analogs can you think of that might represent the notion or the concept of teaching? And we would brainstorm that, writing it on the board, keeping up with the things that the students would be calling out. And then we would lead the students to discuss the analogy and to investigate it, find ways that it represents the concept. We probably would do this also using jigsaw or cooperative learning groups, or share pairs, or heads together, or any number of grouping strategies. Then element 3 is, in strategy 1, is to have the students impersonate the analogy, so that we would lead them to adopt the persona of, in this case, the analogy, the stream. Teaching is like a stream. So what does a stream feel? What does it think? What is its purpose for being? How does it relate to other elements of nature? And so forth. Element 4, then, we would ask the students, after we had unpacked element 3 thoroughly, we would ask them to invent their own new analogies. Let's think of another analogy, another thing that teaching might be like. And after developing a good list of those on the board, you might put students together in groups where they thought of a similar analogy, and have them discuss the ways in which teaching is like their new analogy. In element 5, then, we would have to refocus the students on the original concept. We're really thinking here about teaching. What is teaching like? So we would lead the students to reconsider the original concept and examine it now in light of some new discoveries that the discussion of the analogs has revealed for us. In the second strategy, in element 1, I would, as the teacher, would simply suggest the analogy. In this case, I would just say teaching is like a stream, rather than have the students come up with a bunch of analogies and pick one of them. And then I would suggest a particular analogy and explain to the students and invite them to help me explain the concept in terms of this particular analogy. So now I think teaching is like a stream because teaching always flows downhill. It flows from the source to the place of need. So why do you think teaching might be like a stream? So I would invite the student participation. Then the teacher leads the class in discussing the related ideas to the analogy as they may be illustrative of the original concept. Element 2 of strategy 2 is then to invite the students to make a second analogy, this time an analogy of their own origination, and have them explain to the class or to small groups how that analogy represents the original concept. Element 3 then is having the students, again like in the first strategy, impersonate the analogy, speaking for it, speaking to the world how the analogy or the analog would like itself expressed over major issues that concern it. Element 4 then would be contrasting the analog with the concept. So is teaching like a stream, or is it really different from a stream? It's really different from a stream. Let's make a list of the ways that the two are dissimilar. Teaching has X and streams have Y, and they don't both have any of the members of that list. So finally, we'd ask the students to review the original concept and consider their own new implications about it. So what does this all reveal to us about teaching? In element 5, we may ask students to invent a new analogy and start the process all over again. Well, the learning outcomes for using Synectics is that it leads the children, the students, to an enhanced creative capacity within certain subject domains. It's nurturing. It has nurturing outcomes. It nurtures individual sense of achievement. It nurtures subject domains, achievement in certain subject domains, and nurtures their personal confidence in achievement. It nurtures their capacity for group interaction. Synectics, used with diverse, integrated thematic curriculum design, is really suitable for a creative writing pre-write prompt of some sort, because it turns on creative thinking. It is suitable for exploring social problems, for creating a problem-solving type lesson introduction. It could be a great introduction to a unit. In fact, the model itself is a bit long for most 20-minute lesson segments that we're allowed to have in schools, so it probably would have to span a time segment across a few days of instruction. Well, that's Teaching with Synectics. There are some sample lessons linked on the web, on our course site, and some other video demonstrations of Synectics and explanations that are linked there for you if you wish to understand it further. Thanks a lot. Bye.